I'm just going to record now the shir that I gave on Shabbos, second day of Shavouot, where I spoke. I made actually a summary and a bit an adaptation of the shir that I've heard already twice from Rabbi Weiss, who discusses the point of whether or not the chiyuv of limud Torah is so absolute that the people that are working are actually kind of second-degree citizens. Now, that's not his opinion, and that's not how he positioned his shir, but this is what the way that I have made the interpretation. So the question is the people that are working kind of considered in the Torah world as second-degree citizens, b'diavad Jews that the Katrila should be learning in Koilel, but since the situation did not allow it to happen, and therefore they were actually they have to go to work as a b'diavad, or is it the opposite? Basically, the question is in Judaism in general. In Judaism, is the Koilel, the Beis HaMedrash, in the center of the city, or is it outside of the city? And I mean it in quite a figuratively sense, but also in literal sense, as we see that indeed the Torah is the Beis HaMedrash in the time of Chazal, when we saw that, and not in the city, which is a question mark on itself. But so in order to be able to answer that question, and we need to understand if, for example, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is so total that you have to know the whole Kol HaTorah Kula. That's the first question. Is it true that you have to know Kol HaTorah Kula? And the second question is it true that you have to learn Torah the whole time? So from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep, and even trying to wake up earlier and going to sleep later, sleeping as least as possible, eating the least as possible, in order to be able to learn the most as possible minutes. And that is the chiyuv on itself. And then the third point is of course, what is the kind of the ikar in life? Is it the working, or is it the learning Torah? It sounds like an obvious question, but I think that the answer is not what you probably would expect. Now, to answer those questions, we have to start with the first question, is of course, do we need to learn the Kol HaTorah Kula? There he brings down from Moshe Feinstein in Simen Kuf Yud, in Yoredeo Chelik Dalot, I think, where he receives a letter from somebody that is learning Daf Yomi, and he wants to know if he supports that. And of course, he says that because there is a mitzvah to know Kol HaTorah Kula, if a person learns the whole Shas in 7 years, he will finish off to have learned Kol HaTorah Kula. That's a very big chiyuv, a very big mitzvah, and therefore he says it's a chiyuv, it's a chiyuv. He calls it in one of his in the middle of the end actually of his Torah. He says Al Kol Ponim v'Rashi Mefurusha Chiyuv Lilmod Kol HaTorah, and that it's a chiyuv to learn Kol HaTorah Kula. However, when we look in the Gemaras, but also in some of the Rishonim, we do see that it's not 100% like that. For example, we see a certain Amor, I think it was Rabbi Babachon, that meets with Eliyahu Nuvi in the Beis HaKvoros, and Eliyahu Nuvi asks him what he wants, if he has a shaila, and he says, yes, I have a shaila. Basically, I would like to know what is this halacha. And Eliyahu Nuvi answers him, and then suddenly he realizes, how can Eliyahu Nuvi be in the Beis HaKvoros since he is a Kohen? And so Eliyahu Nuvi says to him, I don't understand your question, because you should have known that there is a brayso that says that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai holds that a mess from a goy is not metame b'tumas oil, and since he's not touching any mess, but it's the shaila in Beis HaKvoros is more of a tumas oil, and since by the goyim there is no tumas oil, only tumas maga, then there is no shaila and there is no issur to be in the Beis HaKvoros. And so he answered him back. He says, well, I'm really, basically you're right, but if already on I hardly know 4 of the 6 Dorim, Siddur Mishnah, you want me to know on all 6 of them? Basically, Taharos was not one of the Dorim that the Tamor knew. So he didn't learn it properly, and therefore he didn't know it yet. So basically, he only knew 4 of the 6 Dorim of the Siddur Mishnah. He knew according to Rashi, Noshim, Nezikim, Moyed, and obviously also apparently Kochim as well, probably, as Rashi explains, because when a person learns about Kochim, about the components, it is as if he is Mekayim and brings a korban. So basically, that is how he actually answered him. So you see here that this big Amoire, who even had the opportunity to meet Eliyahu Hanovi, so it's not somebody, not of the lowest part of the Amoiroim, but it's actually of the higher part, and he says that about himself, that he didn't know Taharas and he didn't know Zroim, because it was not relevant to him. It's very similar, the Ribosh says about his Rebbe, the Ram, Rabbeinu Nissim Zal, that he says that he knew Boki B'Shloisho Sedorim, that he was a Boki on 3 Sedorim of the Shisha Seder Mishnah, probably Noshim, Nezikim, and Moyed, but on the other 3, basically, he was not a Boki. So there is such a thing, although it sounds not like a very big compliment, but for the Rivash, it was saying a very big compliment if somebody knows 3 Sedorim. So you see here that to learn Kol HaTorah is not necessarily a prerequisite to be what we can call a Talmid Chochem and a big master. The second question was, do we have to learn the whole time? In other words, is it really important that the whole time of the day is chiyuv, is mamish to learn the whole time of the day? Not just important, not just good, but is it really part of the chiyuv of Talmud Torah? And this is basically in Yehoshua, it is nearly explicit. Leyomush sefer haTorah zeh mipicho v'giso boy yoimon v'laylo. So basically, it's a clear chiyuv that Yehoshua was told, and therefore he says Leyomush sefer haTorah zeh mipicho, never to be able to stop talking in the Torah, or never to forget. Apparently, how you want to translate it. But v'giso yoimon v'laylo, you should think or you should speak. And basically, there is a Gemara in Nedorim which asks the question, if somebody makes a Shavouot that he's going to learn a Masechta or a Perek, is the Shavouot Chal or not? So what's the question? Of course, he should be Chal. But the Gemara says no, because he is a Mushbach B'Amed Ma'asina, he's already Mechuyev to learn Torah. And so therefore, what he says is he's going to learn Torah, and we all know, Ein Shavouot Chal al Shavouot, and so therefore it should not be Chal. The Shavouot should not be Chal. And answers the Gemara that the Shavouot could be Chal. Why? Because he could pater himself, as a famous Gemara, he could pater himself with the Kriyas Shema Shel Shachas and Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis. So when you say Kriyas Shema in the morning, you say Kriyas Shema in the night, theoretically, practically, you have been already mekayim the mitzvah of learning Torah. Whether the learning Torah is Vishinamtam Levonecho, V'dibarto Bom, or the Belmadetem Oisom, or it is Otoi B'chol Levavchem, whatever the loshon can be, whatever the posuk can be, but you are mekayim it when you are doing a Kriyas Shema Shel Shachis, then you have it for the day, and Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis for the night. And so this is basically the Gemara, the maskon of the Gemara, and the Ran says that when the Gemara says that it's only Yotze with Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis and Shel Shachris, he says that it's clearly lav davke. It's clearly lav davke because he says, and I will read it to you, Sharechayev kol od milmoy tomid yom v'laylo. Because he is mechuyev to learn the whole time yom v'laylo. There is no such a thing that if you just take Kriyas Shema, then you put to learn Torah, you have to continue learning the whole day and the whole night. So this is clearly the Ram. Then he continues to explain a little bit the Gemara. But in any case, this is a clear psak that the Ram brings down that the person is mechuyev to learn day and night the whole time. There is no stopping. However, the Ritvaz in his Chuvas in Tuf Nun Tes, where he brings down the Ein Odom Chayv min haTorah lilmoy tomid. Min haTorah, person is not mechuyev to learn tomid. Why? The iboy potar nafshei b'kriyas Shema Shel Shachris, Kriyas Shema Shel Arvis. And so imkein Talmud Torah reshus. Therefore, the idea is that it's not a chiyuv, but it is a reshus. Of course, it's a tremendous reshus, a tremendous schus to be able to learn Torah. The schar for limud Torah is so big. It has been in all, the last perik of Pirkei Avos is the whole parak about that, on all the ideas of what it brings you, what it gives you. Torah also in the whole Shas, we see that, but that's not the chiyuv. The chiyuv of Talmud Torah is already yotze with Kriyas Shema Shel Shachis and Shel Arvis, and therefore once you said it, then the chiyuv is gone, and the rest is only as a reshus. That's a clear advice that is disagreeing with that disagrees with Ram. Doch Sameach also brings it down, Shaloimet Kabolas HaMitzvah, Va'azeroso B'Shachis U'Ba'arves Kvar Kiyem Mitzvoso. The Sameach, Meir Simcha also passes like that. This is already a contemporary, where he says clearly that when a person says Kriyas Shema, he's already Yoitze the Chiyuv of Talmud Torah. And then the rest is, of course, everybody has to be Mekayim the mitzvah as he has the capability. Some people have smart brains, very academic. They can dig down and do some vertical specialization. Some is more on Bekir, some are more on Chumash, on Tanakh, on all kind of maybe Kabbalah, Hasidus. Whoever the person feels and he has the intellectual capacity, this is his mitzvah to continue learning. So that it's not like a generic mitzvah. Everybody has to learn the same thing, the same Gemaras, and we have to learn more Rashi Tosfos, and every Jew has to learn more Rashi Tosfos. He seems to be disagreeing. He seems to be saying it depends on the capacity and on the character and the personality, the context of every single human being. So here, but in any case, the Meir Simcha clearly says that once you say Kriyas Shema Shachas and Shel Arvis, the chiyuv of Talmud Torah is finished. You don't have a chiyuv anymore. But it's of course there is no question about it that it's still a fantastic mitzvah to continue learning. The Taz, even when somebody would have asked me what is better to learn 2 hours, but when you're very very tired and waking up early in the morning and learn 2-3 hours a sugya, or you can sleep a little bit longer and you would only need an hour to understand the sugya, you would come to the same level of achievement. But in one case, you only have to learn 1 hour because you sleep longer, and in the other case, you would need 3 hours to come to that understanding, but then you sleep much less, and it's quite a suffering. Of course, I think a lot of us would say better to learn 3 hours, because 3 hours of Torah, this is a fantastic time, and somebody that gives up his health and his understanding, his feelings, and his comfort for Torah is much better than somebody who sleeps in and comes fresh and learns in a very short time the same kind of learning. However, the Taz says that it's not like that it's better, therefore, to sleep longer a little bit, and in order to be fresher, to be a perfect brains, clear brains, in order to understand better, or to come to the same level of understanding with a much shorter period. So the Taz has something also quite a chidush, which the Taz brings it down in Even Ezer, actually in Siman Chuf Hey, I think. And it's actually at the end of Seif Kotan Aleph. One is the one that actually is the most clear about that, and is Rabbi Chonon Wasserman. Rabbi Chonon Wasserman, he actually says that, of course, a person, the question is, if a person, for example, has to go to work or has a chasana or whatever it is the pshat is that he is mechuyev in Talmud Torah, but there is another mitzvah or another chiyuv, another obligation that actually is doiche, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, or he is not mechuyev at all in Talmud Torah. And there he says something very, very interesting. Umishum, he says, the chiyuv of Talmud Torah einu chala hal odom elo b'shor shehu ponui uvotal miasiyas tzrochov. So when a person is ponui and he does not have anything else to do during the day, on that moment he is mechuyev to learn Torah. The choksib osaftu de genecha, that he has to work. Osaftu de genecha, according to Rabbi Chonon Wasserman, is a chiyuv, is a mitzvah of a person to work, and so therefore when he is working, he is bechlal potur of Talmud Torah. It's not like Talmud Torah is nitche for working, but simply is potur. There is no chiyuv at all in when he's working of Talmud Torah. This is in the Kovetz Ores as well. It says the Rabbi Chonan Wasserman. And we will see that the Chassam Sofer agrees with that, and we'll see other poskim as well. Now, there is a very famous tira in order to understand a little bit what is the ideal world. Is the ideal world that we will always be sitting learning Torah, and some of us that cannot learn for some reason, they will go to work, or is it the opposite? Everybody will be working, and whoever is been dedicated to learn Torah will be of the Asor Batloni. There is a stira, to answer that, there is a stira in the Gemara, in between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in the Shita of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Shmuel, between the Gemara in Brochus and the Gemara in Menuchas. The Gemara in Brochus, in Daf Lamed Hei Amud Beis, says, "V'posaftu de gonecho, mata amud loima," says, "Lefi shenamar leyumush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha yochel dvorim kiksovon." And maybe a person is not allowed to work and he has to keep on learning Torah the whole time. Talmud loima v'posaftu de gonecho. Says Rabbi Shmuel that there is a v'posaftu de gonecho. There's a chiyuv to hanik ban minik derech eretz, that you have to work basically. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai omer efshar onim choyr b'shas shrit v'zera b'shas zeri v'koytz b'shas ksir v'dosh b'shas tish v'zera b'shas ruach Torah mat heoleo אלא בזמן שישראל לא יסכסון של מוקום, אנחנו נעשה על ידי אחרים, שנאמר, זורם ואצטרה, בזמן שאין ישראל יסכסון של מוקום, אנחנו נעשה על ידי עצמה, שנאמר, בוספטו דגנך. So normally we learn it Kashma, bosaftu degnecho to be a brocha. According to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it's not a brocha, it's a klola, it's only a plan B. That bosaftu degnecho, unfortunately, there is a case where you will have to do the work yourself. But theoretically, a person is to learn continuously. So we see Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that the person has to learn continuously and only work if he has to. And Rabbi Shmuel that the Etzem says now bosaftu degnecho is a kind of a field, a person has to go and work. And this is the two shittas of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. However, in the Gemara in Menuchas, it seems to have been turning upside down, because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the one that actually says that afilu lo yikoru odom elokei hashma shachis v'arbis kiyem lo yomush. It was mekayim the mitzvah of lo yomush that you are mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah even just by saying Kriyas Shema shachis v'arbis. Over there also lo yomru b'fnei amoret. Okay, but in any case, and Rove said mitzvah lo yomru b'fnei amoret, and I'm not going to go into that. So we see Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says is of the opinion that a person, although on Brochus he says that you have to learn the whole time and you shouldn't work, but on the other hand he says that the Torah, if you just say Kriyas Shema shachas and harvest, you will kind of miss of Talmud Torah, which could be still aligned with each other. But it is very interesting that just afterwards the Rabbi Shmuel is asked by his nephew, if I already I want to learn Greek philosophy, should I do it or not? And he says, Rabbi Shmuel answered to his nephew, he brought down the posuk, lo yomush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicho, v'gisa bo yomim v'laylo, zeu bedoik sho she'einu lo min hayom v'lo min halaylo, u'lemoit bas bo chochmas yivonis. So Rabbi Shmuel is the one that says to his nephew that if you find the time that is not there, not night, then you can learn Chochmas Yivonis, can learn Greek philosophy. But that's very interesting. In other words, he says to him not to learn, that he's not allowed to learn Chochmas Yivonis, but he has to keep on learning the Torah, making Chazor, or whatever it is. I don't know what he should have done. But in any case, he's the one that says that you're not allowed and you have to keep on learning. So this is tira here. Here, on one hand, it is the reason from Rabbi Shmuel is used by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that basically a person has to work because he can be yotze the mitzvah of in the morning and the evening, and the reason that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says was and that's that this is used by Rabbi Shmuel, while in Brochus it seems that he's not using that as a posuk, as a rai for his opinion. So there is here a very clear stira, a contradiction between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the shitta between the Gemara in Brochus and the Gemara in Menachos. That question is a very famous question. The Shulchan Aruch Rav already also noticed that question, and he gives an answer that a person has to learn at least. There is a minimum that a person has to know. As Tayag Mitzvahs, there are certain things that a person has to know before he can actually start living his life. In other words, before, for example, getting married, before starting to work, there is a minimum that he has to know. Once he knows the minimum, then there is, of course, the shyness of what he should be doing. Should he rather go to work, or should he sit and learn further and maybe suffer of parnosa or being dependent on others, which is also not an ideal. And this is already the machlokas between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Shmuel in Brochus. But theoretically, the first step is, of course, first to know that there is a minimum, and that's how he explains the difference between the Gemaras. The one Gemara is before he knows, and therefore Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai clearly says that you have to learn, because otherwise you will not know. If you will not know the basics, then you should not go out to work. And the Gemara in Menachos is when he already knows, as a raya, because that's exactly what the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel said. I know already Kolato Ekula, according to the Shulchan Aruch Rav, the Balatanya, it would have meant I know the Kolato Ekula, the minimum that I have to know. And so therefore now I have the opportunity, and so he's explained, Rabbi Shmuel says no, not because it's a chiyuv that you have to learn, but he explains simply because the learning, the Chochmas Yivonis on itself is an issue, not because it's Bittul Torah, but because it's an issue to learn Chochmas Yivonis. I don't have to explain why, but it's apparently for a lot of poskim and a lot of Gemaras, it seems to have been an issue. That issue was kind of lifted up by a lot of Rishonim, like the Rambam, who learned Chochmas Yivonis, unless maybe there are differences in interpretation of what is, or definition of what is Chochmas Yivonis, but a lot of the Rishonim learned Chochmas Yivonis, and today it seems to have been going back to that original issue. So that's one teretz of on the steer between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, between the Gemara in Brochus and the Gemara in Menachos. The Chasam Sofer in two places. I have it here in Lulav HaGozel, where on Daf Lamed Hey, I think. In any case, just before Daf Lamed Vov on the base, or maybe it's Daf Lamed Vov on the Aleph. I don't have it anymore. No, it's Daf Lamed Vov on the Aleph. Sorry, yeah. On Lulav, it has also a small pirush on Chidushim on Maseches Lulav, Maseches Sukkah, and it's Perek Lulav HaGozel. And there he says very, very clearly that the Machlokes, the Rabbi Shmuel, that holds that a person should work, is actually in Eretz Yisrael. And there he says that the reason why Rabbi Shmuel says after the Genech is a mitzvah, like Rabbi Chol Passaman also holds that it is a chiyuv. He holds that chiyuv is only in Eretz Yisrael, because when we are in Eretz Yisrael and Rov Yisrael Shuruin, when the Rov Yisrael are in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore the Kedush Eretz Yisrael is complete, and all the mitzvahs and naeges is also naeges then Minat Torah. Then also the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is also noeg Minat Torah according to that. Although there are some discussions, maybe even if the chiyuv of Trumas and Meises are not Minat Torah, but still the Yishuv Eretz Yisrael could also be Minat Torah. There's already a discussion where it seems from the Ramban that is still a chiyuv of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, and even Kibush Eretz Yisrael is even chal today, as he says very clearly. But he says the Chasam Sofer holds that if the Rov Yisrael are shroin, sho ha'avoida b'karka gufo mitzvah mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael ulehoitzi perosei HaKadosh. So he says, in other words, that the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is in there is the vosafta de Genecho valze tzivso HaTorah vosafta de Genecho. He says vosafta de Genecho is a tzivui. It's a mitzvah aseh kind of, which is not counted in the Tayak mitzvahs for some reasons that we need to understand why. But in any case, he says that the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, working the land and taking out the fruits of the land is a mitzvah of Asafta de Genecho, and that chiyuv is mamish a chiyuv, and therefore he also explains very nicely that Boaz, that actually came in the night to work. Why was he working in the field in the night? What was it so important in the night? The person should be learning and not be working in the field. But because that is at that moment, it was the chiyuv and the mitzvah of working in the land. Mishum mitzvah. וכאילו תוימר לא אניח תפילין מפני שאני עוסק בתורה. If somebody would say, I'm learning Torah, and therefore I don't need to put on tefillin, I don't need to daven, I don't need to do all kinds of mitzvahs. No, there is no such a concept. So therefore, lo yoima, lo yesoiv degoni mipnei esek haTorah, ve'efshar afilu sharei, that I can't read it properly, שיש בוהם יישוב או אוילום, הכל בכלל מצווה. שערי, maybe a שער umnus. But not only as a farmer is the mitzvah chiyuv, but also other jobs that a person has to do is also mechuyev in Eretz Yisrael. So if I'm a carpenter, I have to be a carpenter in Eretz Yisrael. It's a mitzvah because the land needs me. The chelik of the issue of Eretz Yisrael is that there is policemen, there are doctors, there are lawyers, there is judges, there are people that put the streets and take away the rubbish. They build houses. These are all part of the, he says, maybe he wants to say the Efsha, that these are also part of the Yeshuvat Yisrael. שיש בהם יישוב ואוילום, הכל בכלל המצווה. He says Efsha, אבל כשאנו מפוזרים משום בין אומס האוילום, וכל שמר באוילום יישוב, מויסי ואבוידס השם קורבן, מוידה רבי שמואל ורבי שמעון יוחאי. So he says that if, as we are today, not in Eretz Israel, so there Rabbi Shmuel would be more Rabbi Shmuel that today in Chutz La'aretz a person should be learning Torah. So the Chazam Sofer clearly says that today it's better to learn. The chiyuv is to learn like Rabbi Shmuel because we need a Torah, and that's the only way that we can do at least a little bit of a tikkun olam. And this is kol haloimet mishmo Torah lishmo is mesameach sabriyos. So because this is kind of a tikkun that we are doing, but in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, it is not for every Jew to start learning, that the Jews have to be farmers and have to be carpenters and doctors and builders. And actually is, I think in another place where he says that you can't even ask a goy to do it because that's a mitzvah that is shabigufoi. You cannot ask a goy or an Arab that would be living in the land to work for you. The mitzvah is on you to do it. So he holds that today it's not a chiyuv, or maybe he learns that while we're in Golus, as long as we are in Golus, we are not in Eretz Yisrael, then the mitzvah is the learning Torah and not the issue of Eretz Yisrael. It does not hold that there is kind of a generic tikkun olam. But if I'm a good carpenter in Belgium, for example, then I'm doing tikkun olam. He says it seems to be what he is saying is that it seems to be only in Eretz Yisrael. And so, since it's not a chiyuv klolis of tikkun olam, the Chazam Sofer seems to be saying that it is not a chiyuv, there is no basafta de ganecho, and therefore learning Torah is like Shim Bar Yochai, is a chiyuv and not actually work. However, there is a rishon, which not a lot of people know, but there is a rishon in that's brought down in Tosis Rishonim in Meseches Yoma Perek Shmini Daf Pei Hei Omed Beis, and it's really a very, very important Tosis Rishonim, who actually brings down from Rabbeinu Tam that v'kosher mikan, there's also that, but in any case, kosher mikan al ma sherogi Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Yankiv, in this case, Loima, the Talmud Torah Toflu legabe derech eretz. So the Eretz, and this is clear also from the continuation, the Eretz, he means working, as we saw before. The Eretz means to work, to be also be Yishuv Olam, and he says he speaks generically, not Dafkin Eretz Yisrael, but generically the Eretz is Kodem la Torah. Basically, what he wants to say is that the Eretz is the Iker and the Torah is a Tofel. With the Gomar, because it says in Pirkei Avos, Yofet Talmud Torah im derech Eretz. So it's nice the Talmud Torah in the Eretz. So you have the Eretz, and it's nice. The Eretz is nicer when there is a Torah with it. And so it seems to be saying that the Eretz is the Iker and the Torah is a Tofel. Then he brings down all kind of questions. It says that that the person should work the least as possible, learn the most as possible, etc. And so therefore, Rabbi Chonon and one of the Rishonim, Rav Rabbeinu Rabbi Chonon Loima ki Torah eino ikedo, that he can't say Avloi hoyo nire Rabbeinu El Chonon Loima ki Torah eino ike, because he has all kind of rayas that he says the hochi koma. Afterwards, he says, "V'chol Torah she'ein imo melocha adrabe teidoch ibcha imo damrinu nami pekas boch b'shoinim osu torosim kvar melach tanarai." He brings down all the things that nan b'memchas devorim Torah niknis b'miut derech eretz. So it seems very clearly a lot of rayas against Rabbeinu Tam. But it's interesting, Rabbeinu Tam really held that if the ikar is the working, and not only in Eretz Yisrael, but generically, the Eretz is the Iker, and then the Torah is only a way to lift up this working and probably keeping it in the Das Torah, and we should be honest, and everything should be according to the Rotzon of Hashem, but the Iker is the Eretz. Also, Vilna Gaon, actually, very interesting, the Vilna Gaon also says that when a person is busy with the mitzvah, is potter of Talmud Torah, and in that case, then therefore the mitzvah of which Chazal say that you are in kind the mitzvah of Talmud Torah with Yashmach, Shachas, and Arbes. He says that if a person is oisik a mitzvah, or bederech eretz, or is also oisik shu gam mitzvah, because also mitzvah to work is also mitzvah. Clearly, the Vilna Gaon holds that the derech eretz is also a mitzvah, and therefore, when you are working, you're potu as oisik mitzvah potu men mitzvahs. As we said, Rabbi Chonon, I think, personally goes a step further than the Vilna Gaon. He says, "Bechlal there is no chiyuv of limudat Torah." Not als because he's oisik mitzvah potu men mitzvahs. There are some nafkeminis that we could find between if it's bechlal potu or oisik mitzvah potu men mitzvah. Well, you could even go in as a pilpul. Is oisik mitzvah potu men mitzvah is bechlal potu in ganzen, that he is not chal, or is it just that it is still mechuyev, but he is potu in terms that it's nidche. It's only doiche. And then the question is, of course, derech eretz is not only people that are working with their hands, that are building something, but even business people that buy and sell are also considered derech eretz. This is a mefurish ramo in Hilchot Shabbos Siman Reish Mem Ches, mamish at the end, where he speaks about if you're allowed to leave on a boat before Shabbos, from when you're allowed to, and if you're only allowed to, from when you're only allowed to when you are going L'Shem mitzvah for a certain mitzvah. And then he says that also person, what is also bichlal l'dvar mitzvah, is also somebody she'odam hoylech l'sroire, is choshuv hakol l'dvar mitzvah. So if a person goes for business reasons, he goes to buy material in order to sell it or to use it for whatever reason, this is also considered l'dvar mitzvah. So you see again that the eretz is a mitzvah, and Mishnah Berurah says there something very interesting, that because then people would say, yeah, but 1 second, maybe only a person that works mamish for his minimum, he can live from 1,000 or 1,000, 2,000 euros. A person can theoretically live and not die from hunger. But if somebody wants to have much more, in order to have a second car and be able to do nice chasanas, nice bar mitzvahs, and he wants to go to nice holidays, so he wants to live and he works harder, is this also considered a mitzvah? And therefore the Mishnah Berurah says, so if somebody wants to have even more la'arvocha, meaning for more, you could translate that as what you would say today for luxury, is also still considered a bar mitzvah. And so you see here the Mishnah Berurah clearly saying that the Eretz is a mitzvah, and therefore it seems to be, according to the Vilna Gaon, as an oisek mitzvah mitzvah. And so therefore you have two reasons why when a person is working, he is potu, either like Rabbi Chono Wasserman, that is bichlal not chayiv, or like the Vilna Gaon, that he is maybe chayiv, but is as an oisek mitzvah mina mitzvahs. So we have seen here that it's important to work, and that the ideal world is a world where we will be working. Maybe the Levim will be the ones that will be teaching Torah, learning and teaching Torah. and they will be giving us shiurim, while we will be working the field, we will be farming. The problem with all this is that at the end of the day, if a person will always say, well, I don't have time, or I'm very busy with a lot of things, is that at the end of the day, he will end up being a damoros, and if a person does not learn Torah, he cannot perform the mitzvahs properly, and so he can really waste his whole life. And there's a chiyuv and to be this kind of obligation to be a bit of a learned man. You don't want to come up there with no Torah at all. And so it's clear that the person has to be kovea itim la Torah. That's why Hazal teaches us that when a person comes to the world there, after 120, he's been asked, have you been kovea itim la Torah? So in other words, like Rebbe Chonan is very nice, because he says that when you have time, so a person can therefore make sure that he never has time, can put on his agenda all kind of obligations. He has to go to speak to his parents, and then an appointment with his doctor, and an appointment with his children, an appointment with his brothers and his sisters, and an appointment with his friends, and going to all kinds of engagements that he can, also the gym and whatever it is, and never have time to learn Torah. And so therefore it's very important to be a kovea itim la Torah, to keep that mamish very, very strongly, because once you kovea itim la Torah, you really have to keep it, even when there are all kind of other obligations that would rather maybe be very difficult to keep. So that's something very, very important. And the second point, which is also very important, is although we said in the beginning that it's not a chiyuv to learn kol haTorah kula, but we also saw the Shulchan Aruch Rav that the Torah mitzvahs is the basics. The problem with a lot of the mitzvahs that we should be able to be mekayim, we can't be mekayim. The Mekubolim and also Chazal are explaining us is that the Taig mitzvahs are Ramach Borim and Shesor Gidim. In other words, it's part of our body, is all the mitzvahs. And if a person is mekayim the Taig mitzvahs, he is metaken his body, so that when he comes up in the upper world, his body is complete, kind of the neshama is complete. There are 613 lines that are connecting with the Seichel Eloki and us, with our neshama, and these 613 are connected to our body parts. And so when we mekayim mitzvah with our bodies, we are metaken, each one is metaken these lines and is strengthening these lines, and so we come up with a perfect neshama. The problem is, most of the mitzvahs we cannot be mekayim. So how are we going to be mekayim those mitzvahs? And so there are a lot of answers on that question, but the main answer that is theoretically is more what Chazal say on Kochim. This is Unashalmu Purim Sosenu, meaning that if a person learns Hilchos Chatos, it's like he's mekayim the mitzvah, he brings a Chatos, mekayim the mitzvah of Chatos. If a person learns Hilchos Oila, he is mekayim the mitzvah of bringing oil. So a person like Kochim, it's very clearly said, and we already mentioned it, that if a person learns Hilchos Korbanos, it's as if he brings a korban. And so basically, the question now is this also valid for other mitzvahs? For example, I don't, Baruch Hashem, there is no shilas of Yibum, of Gerushin. So how can I be mekayim those mitzvahs? Is of course to learn the Hilchos Yibum, Hilchos Gerushin, Hilchos Trumas Maestros, Hilchos Bikurim, Hilchos Bechorim, Hilchos Milchom, and all the other things, Soim Tosam Melech, and all the mitzvahs that we cannot be mekayim today. But if we're learning the halachos, we can be. And that's a question now: is learning the halachos from Soim Tosam Melech is as if I was mekayim the mitzvah of putting up a king in Klal Yisrael? And that's a very valid question. Because I could have said that it says before from Neshama Purim Sosein. So it's only Purim meaning Korbanos. But maybe when I'm learning Hilchos Lulav, am I also being mekayim the mitzvah of Lulav? Even though that I have a chiyuv to take Lulav today, but still, is if I'm learning the halachos, is it as if I was mekayim the mitzvah or not? And there are two shittahs clearly saying that it is the shlo, in more of a makubal, who clearly says that he explains he explains that if a person wants to be kind of mitzvah, he should know. It says the pasuk, it's very easy, very close to you. You can be a kind of mitzvah. How? If you are learning it, you're saying the hilchos, you're saying that you're going to be mekayim mitzvah. If you could, you would have been mekayim the mitzvah. That's already on itself is the kiyum of the mitzvah. He says, there is a takona which will be in your mouth. Since he does everything that he can do, so this first step of being mekayim mitzvah is to learn the halachos of the mitzvah and to be mekabel myself to be mekayim the mitzvah, and then I take a rule. And so the first part, the part that I have to do, I can do. The fact that there is today no Beis Hamikdash, or there is, I'm not in Eretz Yisrael, that's a problem, a side problem. But I have done the part that I can do, which is to learn the mitzvahs, to learn the halachas, and to be mekabel myself, to be mekayim them if I would have had the opportunity. And that's already considered as being as if I was mekayim the mitzvah. Similarly, the Mabittin is Akdoma, and also apparently in Beis Elokim also, where he says the same thing, that if a person, if somebody reads it, it says that it learns halachos of when a person has a field, then he has to bring meister bikurim, meister hummus, meister rishon, meister sheni, etc. And then if a person has a shoyer and the shoyer nokach has a shoyer, then there is this dinim, etc. If he is saying it, the kriyosom and the kabbalossom, then it's neshto loik ilu asto. So it's not only mitzvahs that are related to korbanos, but also mitzvahs that are not related to korbanos, all the other mitzvahs, all the direct mitzvahs. And he's marich on them, therefore he says, the person learns and roish lekabel tzrach, klomar b'drishet lekabel tzrach ke'asir. Zeh kol ever ve'ever, omer atei mitzvah, ki lekulam yagia moni yofer, ומה שיעשה בפועל, ומה שיקבל על עצמו בקריאה, וכן ביומים בכל יום, איזו שלא לעבור שום עבר ועבר, שאינם תלוי סבוי בקריאות, יום וקבלוסו נחשב לא כאילו בו ליודע ולא יעשו. ואם כן נזכן כאילו השניהם תרוך. So either by, for example, if somebody, how can you maintain the mitzvah of a loisase? So if somebody is mekabel on himself that if he would have been in the situation, he would not have been over the loisase, then he's as if he's mekayim the loisase. Similarly, if a person thinks that if I would be in Eretz, there would have been a Beis Hamikdash, or I would have a cow, or I would have whatever it is, I would be part of the Bezdin, and or I would be a Kohen, and then I would have not done that or done this, and that's why this is as if I'm mekayim the mitzvah. It's a bit of a chidush. But this is how those two giants of Torah have clearly told us. So basically, in short, it is important for a person to actually, as I always suggested, to learn the Torah mitzvahs. It's not such a difficult job to learn Torah mitzvahs. The whole Sefer Achinuch is maybe a book that is a small book that is rather, I don't know how many pages. Actually, it's 350 pages, I think, because it's 7 pages. You can finish if you learn for 50 days, 7 pages. Yeah, so it's 350 pages. You can finish the whole chinuch and learn the whole Torah mitzvahs. And when you learn the whole Torah mitzvahs, it's as if you learn the Kol HaTorah Kula. And therefore, you have a very good overview. And then, of course, once you know that, once you know the Rambam's Torah mitzvahs, you can add the Rambam, the Smak, and start to learn the Bahag. You have to learn also, of course, the Bahag, and you have to learn the other from Azora is from in the time of the Goinim, and then you can learn the Rashbam. So therefore, you can add on, but you can take as the basis, the core is, of course, the mitzvahs of the Rambam. And once you've learned that, should not be impossible, but that could mean that you have learned collateral kula. And so to answer the first question, no, collateral kula, the Ramosha Feinstein thinks that yes, you have to learn collateral kula, but we saw that a lot of Rishonim, that some Rishonim did not know collateral kula according to their Talmidim, or at least they were not booking them. We also saw that the person has to learn the whole time, yes, according to the Ram, but we saw that Taylor Meir Simcha says that with even with saying Shema Shtachas and Shalachis, we also saw from the Ritbas that since you Yotze with Shema Shtachas and Arvis, the rest is only a Reshus. It's a holy Reshus, it's a fantastic Reshus, which everybody should do as much as we can, because the Torah is tremendous of Talmud Torah. It cleans up, it's upper avoidance, it also it breaks down Gezerah, Roes, it heals from Machlas. Gemara brings out so many good things that come out from learning Torah, but in any case, as a chiyuv of Talmud Torah, the mitzvah still Talmud Torah, it's only a reshus. And then we saw also that the ideal world, according to the Chatam Sofer, is actually where there was after the Gonecha. Chiyuv is a mitzvah, and a mitzvah that you cannot even be such a mitzvah that you cannot be potter of that mitzvah if you learn Torah. In the opposite, you should actually stop from learning Torah and you should go to the field and work in the field. And it's avoid the Shebeguf, eventually, if not even being able to do it. We also saw Rabbi Chanan Wasserman that, of course, it's when a person is busy with all kind of other stuff, then he's potter of learning Torah, but he has to realize, of course, then that he has to be committed to not Torah, because if you are putting on your agenda, you still manage your own agenda. There are certain things, the minimum you have to do. You have to be a good wife, a good husband in this case, a good husband, a good father, a good son, a good grandson, a good grandfather, a good friend, a good member of the community. There are a lot of things that you can do. But in any case, there is also importance of being Kobiya in Torah. This is one of the first questions that we to a person when they come about being Kobiya. And then we also saw that the importance of learning Taryag Mitzvahs. So the Taryag Mitzvahs, a person learns a Taryag Mitzvahs, he has been kind of Taryag Mitzvahs, at least once in a life to finish Taryag Mitzvahs. But not only that, the advantage of learning Taryag Mitzvahs, if you know Taryag Mitzvahs properly, especially from the Rambam, you have actually already starting to taste what Torah Kula is. The way that I always explain it is when you start to learn Gemara, you have a feeling that you're learning a tree and another tree, and then you learn another tree from a big forest, but you don't see the forest through the trees. But when you learn the Taryag Mitzvahs, you are actually starting to see the forest. And then what you can do is, in a few of the mitzvahs, you're going to learn the trees separately. But at least you know the forest. When a person starts to build a puzzle, he also doesn't start from the middle. What he does is he always starts from the border, because the border pieces are easier to find, and therefore you can easier do it without even checking the colors. Sometimes obvious where they are. But the second part is also then you know at least that everything else has to be in the middle. And then it's only the question, okay, the greens, the colors have to be on the right side and the yellows on the left side. So you know more or less where the things have to be. But the borders is the most important one to start with. And that is the Taryag Mitzvah. Taryag Mitzvah is the borders. Don't forget neither that when we say that a ger, for example, wants to become a Jew, then he has to be Mekabel himself the Taryag Mitzvahs. And how come that the ger is to be Mekabel himself Taryag Mitzvahs and we don't even know what the Taryag Mitzvahs are? So the basic of the basic, and this is also what Rabbi Shavouot says, that before even a person can start thinking of getting married, going to work, studying, whatever it is, he has to know the Taryag Mitzvahs, because that's basically the foundations. If you want, it's also constitution, as the Rambam would have called it today, is the constitution of the whole Torah, of whole Judaism. So if you don't know the Taryag Mitzvahs, you actually don't really know what Judaism is all about. In any case, should we be zoiche indeed to the gula shlema, that we should be able to be zoiche to be mekayim the mitzvah was up to the genecho with the issue of oret, and to be able to take out the fruits and also to eat of the fruits, to be able to be ne'ana from the holy fruits that the Torah will bring us, and that we should be able to bring those fruits if we will be the farmers that we already discussed. And you have farmers, you have shepherds, and you have builders. So depending on where you will be, but those who will be farmers, they will be able to bring the bikurim to the Beit HaMikdash and read the Kriya and thank for the Eretz Kovas, Eretz Zovas Cholobot Rosh. We reserve it back to the Gula Shlem, Mero Yomeinu, Amen.